Hey everybody, I am here with Amy Vilela. Hopefully I said your name correctly. She is running for Nevada's 4th district, and she's running as a progressive. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome, very, very welcome, and thank you for running for office, because I think it's a really important thing that people, take initiative and they try to run for stuff that they believe in.
Yeah, we're all
So,
in this together.
absolutely. So, the first thing I want to do is I want to get you acquainted with the audience, or I want to get the audience acquainted with you more like. So I want you to basically, I want you to tell your story. I want you to tell them your story and why you decided to run.
Sure. 2 years ago, I was your typical American, just going to work, taking care of my family. I was at the height of my career. I was a CFO. My husband's a pilot in the Air Force. And my daughter gave me a call. We had been stationed in Las Vegas about 5 years ago.
So
And
you're a military family then?
yes, we are.
Yeah,
Yes.
you just mentioned that. Um,
Yes.
so it's a lot of moving around, a lot of sacrifice. Serving your country as your husband does, and that obviously deserves a lot of respect.
Thank you. It is a sacrifice, not only for the men who are serving our country,
Hmm.
but the families go through a lot of moving and being separated from family and friends. But
Absolutely.
it also has a lot of positives. We meet a lot of amazing people every place we go, and we learn a lot. For me, I learned a lot about the struggles that were facing Americans across the country through my different friendships.
Hmm.
So it's been pretty amazing to have the opportunity to see America in a lot of different areas and know the struggles are fairly similar at the core.
Oh, absolutely. You never know what you're going to learn when you talk to people, but I mean, at the same time, I think a lot of us do learn that we face similar issues no matter where you're from, whether it be a small town or a big city. We're all we all have the same things. We all want the same things: good job, health care, take care of
Right.
our families, and food on the table, all that stuff. So it's the common American experience, and
It
sadly,
is.
a lot of our politicians are a little out of touch for that. Um, and so
They really are.
they are,
They're very out
absolutely.
of touch. When I hear them talking, I just, my life's been full of challenges, monetarily,
Hmm.
as well as other challenges that when I hear them speaking, I just don't even know if they've ever lived the typical experience, or are they so, separated from it now that they've forgotten.
Yeah,
They're really out of touch.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think a lot of them have lived that experience. I mean, we live in a country where most of the Senate is filled with millionaires, and it
Right.
takes so much money to run for Congress. I forget how much running for a House seat costs, but for a Senate seat, it's even more expensive. It can be into the millions of dollars. So you need to.
Yes.
It's like our politicians have to beg corporations and big business and special interests for money just to run for office.
And that's unfortunate because it makes them beholden to their donors,
And
which is
absolutely.
why it's so important to have grassroots campaigns where we're beholden to the people. Once you're beholden to the donors, you're really in a situation where your livelihood depends on you satisfying the desires of your donors, and it's not for the people anymore. I think there's probably many politicians that would have had great possibilities in front of
Hmm.
them for making great change. And unfortunately, they are beholden to their donors and special interest. It is a problem, and you can hear it in their rhetoric and
Hmm.
in their hollow and shallow promises. And really, when you look at a lot of bills, they sound great in the
Hmm.
title. They sound great when they're talking about them, but when you actually look at them, they do very little to affect change for the average American.
Yeah, and look, speaking of promises, by the way, the current Democratic Party right now isn't really even promising all that much. I mean, you've noticed that. I'm sure you've noticed that currently their rhetoric is on let's basically have very little change, go establishment, let's save the ACA and everything will be
Right.
fantastic. And Hillary Clinton famously in the campaign talking about what she was going to do for healthcare, because I know that's definitely your big issue here, even though you've got a lot of other great issues that you're talking about. I looked into your campaign. It's a very, very progressive platform that you're running on. But healthcare is, of course, your main thing. And so, when we, hear people like Hillary Clinton saying single payer will never ever happen, hearing Nancy Pelosi talk about, oh, we're just not there yet. And so
Right.
it's rather frustrating
It is.
how little they want to change. But just like, the Nancy Pelosi example, Pelosi, it's not an accident. They get millions of dollars from the health insurance companies.
Right. They do, and you can look that up on
Oh,
online. They
yeah,
get millions of dollars from the healthcare industries, and they're beholden to them. I mean, if we look at healthcare right now, there is a lot of confusion about what Medicare for All is,
right.
and a lot of that, in my opinion, is being communicated to the people on purpose. In abstract, what we're really fighting for is universal health care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's which would mean that everyone would have access not only to health insurance, but health care that they need. The ACA fell short of this goal. We still have 30 million people that still lack health insurance in America.
Right.
And, universal health coverage has many different forms. The one that we're fighting for with Medicare for All is a single payer,
Absolutely.
which is just one insurer. No one falls through the cracks. And there's a lot of advantages to it, even for small businesses. But, it puts everyone into one single risk pool. It creates bargaining power for the healthcare industry, eliminates massive amounts of overhead that would include, the obscene salaries for the CEOs
Mm-hmm.
and their profits, dividends to their shareholders. It would also get rid of, us paying for their lobbyists and their advertising, as well
Yep.
as paying for the guy that's on the phone denying your claim. So it really drives costs down across the board. And a lot of they're scared to go down this route because of the implications, in my opinion, that they would have with their donors. And we all know from history that when you have a program that is across the board and affects every citizen, that it's harder to get rid of that program or attack that program,
Right.
because it's universal.
I mean,
So it is a battle. It's a
yeah,
battle between the people and corporations right now, and we're seeing who's on the side of the people.
absolutely. And let me add on to that. In the case of the ACA, it didn't even have to be universal. I mean, we know the Republicans blocked the Medicaid expansion in a lot of different states, which probably would have helped, but it would have still had the flaws inherent in a for-profit market-based system. So
Right.
either way, it wouldn't have been a perfect piece of legislation, but at the same time, with that Medicaid expansion, it would have been a little bit better than it was.
Right.
But they wouldn't even allow us to do that because, again, health insurance profits, Republicans, ideology, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and they just pulled out. Aetna just pulled out of Nevada's
Yeah.
rural areas here. Now, mind you, this comes on the heels of them making record profits.
Hmm.
So, this is all a numbers game, and it's all, they are really just concerned with the profit motive. And that's what it comes down to it. We are all part of their risk management assessment when they treat us. And, everyone is, I hear a lot of time people saying, well, I'm scared for the government to make decisions for me. Yet our decisions for our healthcare are made all the time from corporations that exist solely for making profit. And they have shareholders that they are their employers, in essence, that demand and require that they get returns on their investments. In an economy that, when we're talking about commodities, that's perfectly acceptable. You can
Like
compete
sneakers.
against another cell phone company that has a different gadget at a different price mark, and the market will fix that. In healthcare, you don't really have any other means of getting healthcare besides going to doctors. And you're not going to sit and talk about who has the cheapest healthcare when you're dying of a heart attack.
Right.
Free market doesn't fix morality issues.
Right.
And it doesn't belong in healthcare.
Absolutely. And that gets me to your story. Now, you know, I read your story and it was absolutely heartbreaking. But for those of in the audience who are not familiar, I'd like you to tell your story to them.
Yeah, so we had moved to Las Vegas. It was our most recent place that we were reassigned. And, you know, we felt pretty good. I mean, everything was going the way we planned. And, you know, we lived in a nice home in a nice neighborhood. I had been through all the struggles of being a single mom and, you know, being on welfare temporarily on Medicaid and WIC. It's very hard to get out of those, but I struggled. And the thing I always told my children, you know, was I want you to remember me not as the mom that always fell down, but the mom that always got back up. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I had finally shown them, you know, this is what happens with all the efforts that you put in. This is the payoff. You know, you have a sense of security. So my daughter called me up and said that she wanted to come out and live with us in Las Vegas, which I knew exactly why she wanted to come out here. But she enrolled in school and got her CNA license transferred. She was working 2 jobs and prepared for the move out here. And she was very independent. I didn't help Shalyn financially since the age of 19. She always had insurance. When she came out to Las Vegas, she immediately said her leg was swollen and red, and it was. And she kept on every day. She was like, "Mom, my knee, my knee." And I was like, "Yes, I know, Shalyn." I was actually starting to get irritated. Like, "I know your knee's hurting." I thought it was just because she had driven across country. Maybe she sat on it wrong. Well, I was out of town on business a couple weeks after she arrived, and I got a phone call, and I could hear her screaming in the background. Mm-hmm. And they were like, "You know, what should we do? What should we do?" And I was like, "Well, take her to the ER, you know." But Shalyn was very fiscally responsible, and she knew she was between job insurances starting up. So she was just trying to make sure it was something that really called for an ER visit. Mm-hmm. When she got there, they immediately asked her, "Do you have insurance?" And my daughter replied, "No, I don't have insurance." Her fate was sealed. They looked at my daughter and said, "You know, there's the door. You can leave now. It's going to be very expensive." And Shalyn's like, no, my leg, it's really hurting. Something's really wrong with my leg. My husband was with her. They had him calling up TRICARE, which is military insurance, in the waiting room before she's even seen. And she didn't qualify for TRICARE.
Right.
TRICARE doesn't fall underneath the ACA. I see a lot of people asking, "Why didn't you have her on your insurance? It's your fault." I've had that said to me, actually.
Oh, man.
TRICARE doesn't cover them from the age of 21 to 23 if they're not full-time enrolled. Shalyn was enrolled in college, but it hadn't begun, so therefore she did not qualify. Shalyn's like, "I still want to be seen," and they get her into the back. I get another call, and I'm fielding these as I'm in a business meeting.
Right.
And to be honest, I'm starting to get irritated again. I'm like, you know, just tell them what you need. I mean, like most Americans, we feel that if you go to the emergency room, you know, you're going to be seen for whatever, you know, you need. This time, my daughter was crying. And she was like, "Mommy, they're not helping me." And I mean, "What do you mean, Shalyn? They're not helping me." I said, "Well, tell them what you need." She begged and begged for something for the pain. They had it listed as an 8 out of 10. And she begged for an MRI to see what was wrong with her leg. They told her specifically to go get insurance and see a specialist. They were in a doctor's office. She had to go back to Kansas City a few weeks later. What she didn't know is that she had a blood clot in her leg. Mm-hmm. And the change in pressure in the airplane made her throw a clot up to her lungs. And I got the call that no parent wants to get. And it's from my ex-husband, and he's in a voice I've never heard. And he's like, "Amy, something about coding. I don't know what's happening." I had my sister who was an RN call and go immediately to the hospital. And I remember hearing those words from her on the phone. I said, "Ellie, Should I come? Because I'm thinking she's 22 years old. And she's like, Amy, you get here as quick as you can. And I was in the car on the way to the airport. I remember just screaming a scream I've never heard come out of me before. And I just couldn't fathom it when I got there and I saw her in the bed and she was on a ventilator. It hit me how serious it was. And my sister being our end could not believe that they did not test. The blood clot was all the way from her knee all the way up to her groin. It had been forming for some time.
Wow.
We had to make the choice she was brain dead. And I knew Shalyn wanted to be an organ donor. She couldn't donate her main organs, but she donated everything else. So I got to hold her as she passed. And I'll tell you, that's a moment that's life-changing for me. And I remember when she was passing, I was screaming out to God, please, just take me. Let my daughter live. And I whispered in her ear, I knew at this point something was up. And before she took her last breath, I promised her, Shalyn, I will get you justice. You will not have died in vain. And I took that promise to her. It wasn't only to her, but it was also to the American people. This should not be happening in this great country. We should not be having 22-year-olds dying from a lack of health insurance. And to add insult to injury, a couple weeks after her funeral, I got a letter in. And as soon as I opened it, being a CFO, I knew exactly what I was looking at. She had COBRA paperwork. Oh. And I looked at the date. My daughter had insurance. And boy, did that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, wow, it was a death sentence for her ignorance on how insurance worked. Mm-hmm. That was a life-changing moment for me. And I became an activist. Not till after about a year. For the first year, I didn't get out of bed, and I was, consumed with grief. I didn't want the world to go on. I wanted it to stop. And then my sister got on the Skype with me, and she looked at me and she started crying. I'm like, what, Ellie? And she's like, Amy, I've lost Shalyn, and now I'm losing you. You're killing yourself. What are you going to do? Are you going to fight for people and make sure this doesn't happen, or are you just going to kill yourself? And I said, I'm going to fight. And I've never looked back since.
Man, that is a powerful story. And, I couldn't imagine. I don't have kids, so I'm going to be honest. But I couldn't imagine the pain of seeing that happen and knowing that something could have happened differently. And look, I read about, as I said, I read the story, and there was one thing that really stood out to me, and that was the phrase wallet biopsy. Now, I'd never heard of that before. Can you explain to everybody what exactly that means?
So a wallet biopsy is that they do, they're required by law. It's called EMTALA, E-M-T-A-L-A, EMTALA, the Emergency Medical and Labor Act. Mm-hmm. Reagan actually passed it into law in '86. They're required that if you present to an emergency room, regardless of your insurance status, your citizenship status, that they must do a medical screening to determine if there is, an emergence factor or not, and they cannot release you without determining that. A wallet biopsy is where they do the absolute bare minimum, just so it's almost as if they're trying not to find something wrong mm-hmm. with you, but they're also trying to make sure that they are covered under EMTALA. They do the bare minimum. I had an experience with this same hospital. Again, I'm dual insured. I go in there, and I'm also, white. I go into the hospital and I have heartburn. I am given an EKG. I am giving pain medication. I am given an MRI and held for observation. And it's just a really bad case of heartburn. Whereas my daughter, who is African American and had no insurance, was asked for insurance immediately. And I wasn't asked till on the way out. So there's a lot of marginalization and discrimination, and based on many different factors. You really can't talk about just healthcare by itself.
Right.
They're all intersectional. You know, economic, racial, and social justice,
Right.
all are intersectional with healthcare justice. And wallet biopsies is just another way that they can try to do what's called risk management in the business world. They are trying to do the bare minimum, so that they can make sure that their profit margins are met. And they have you in risk pools, and they decide the level of care based on the risk management, whatever they suggest they do. They decide, if we have 10 people show up with these symptoms, if we do XYZ, how many of these are going to take us to court? How many of these are actually going to sue? And do we actually gain by not treating versus treating them all? Is it more expensive to not treat this the way we should versus, not treating them and then just having to pay maybe one lawsuit that comes out of this? And with tort reform, that's a very highly unlikely that it makes more sense for them to treat everyone.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest problems of the for-profit health insurance industry that we have, and the for-profit health industry overall. But let me just say, fellow heartburn sufferer, I have actually been through the same thing that you on that. I had a really bad case of heartburn, thought I might be having a heart attack. I went there, tests and hooking everything up, and no problem, we'll see you right away. And that's my experience as I said, a white guy. I'm a big pasty white guy, and immediately in there, no questions. I didn't even have insurance at the time. So, I mean, that's another thing. Nobody asked me for in my insurance status. Just, you need to be seen? Come on in.
And that's the sad reality.
It is.
Of what America is right now.
Yeah.
I know many people who have reached out to me that have a similar situation as Shalyn. And as a parent, nothing pains me more that I couldn't save her. But, I'm not going to stop fighting for people, for the American people, whether it's healthcare, whether it's a livable wage, whether it's, gender discrimination, the LGBTQ community. There are so many people hurting and going through so much struggle in this country because we don't have representation really in our government. We have people, again, that are beholden to their donors, and they're not beholden to we the people. And we need people in there who are going to be champions, for the people, not just placating, not putting through bills, even like the Fight for 15, where they're wanting to do it over 7 to 8 years.
Right.
We need the Fight for 15 now. 7 to 8 years, the buying power of that is going to be $12 an hour. Back in the 60s, if we were to, from the 60s to now, if we were to adjust for inflation for the minimum wage, we'd be well over $20 an hour. We need to be fighting for bold policies that are going to really help the average American and the Americans who are hurting, that are most vulnerable, not just trying to placate with the great little slogans that make them think that they are progressive, when in reality, it's not that bold, and it's not really helping that many Americans. That's the frustrating part, is that we hear all these things, and we hear how the Democratic Party is for the working people, for the marginalized people, but in reality, a lot of them have moved away from that. I would consider myself to be someone in line with an FDR Democrat. I mean, I believe in building an infrastructure and the new Green Deal, and making sure we have a livable wage, making sure that democracy is restored by getting rid of Citizens United. I would love to see publicly funded elections, similar to what they have in New York City. There are so many things that we could be doing to increase the American experience for all Americans, and not just the rich or 1%. That's not being done because it's just not plausible when your campaign and your future, job security really lies with your donors.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do to reform that system. But you actually have to get people in office who are willing to reform that system. And
Yes.
look, like on my show I give a lot of shit to the Democrats. But I think there are some that are good people that do mean well, but they get sucked up in this I must win re-election. If I'm going to do any good, I have to play the game. I have to raise money. I don't necessarily like raising money. I mean, you've probably seen the reports where,
Yes.
politicians will spend, what, upwards to 4 to 6 hours on the phone calling donors and begging for money.
Right. Instead of doing things for the people.
It's an
Yes.
insane system. And, not just Citizens United, but, rolling back things like the decision Bilotti versus First Bank, and the other decisions that gave corporations the power of speech. I mean, this is ridiculous. We're living in a country
Yes.
where corporations have First Amendment speech rights. and that
It's,
money is speech.
and think about why corporations exist. People seem to forget that. And
Yeah.
and maybe a lot of this has been on purpose. But again, taking in consideration my background and what I've done for a living, although most of my work life and my career has been dedicated to nonprofits, I have spent a portion of my career in for-profits, and again, I'm educated educated in accounting and business. Corporations and companies exist for one thing, and that is to their bottom line. If they're not nonprofit, they exist for their for the bottom line, and that's it. That's why they're in business. That's what their meetings are about. How can we increase our profit? How can we decrease our expenses? And that is perfectly well and fine in a lot of industries that are doing commodities. But in things that deal with human life, such as healthcare or prisons, they don't belong there because,
Right.
again, that's not why they exist, and they don't belong in politics.
Yeah, they are amoral. Like, they don't have a morality. They're not good. They're not bad. They're essentially machines. They're fake. They're legal fictions. Their only purpose, as you said, is to raise money, or is to make as much money as possible. And they will do that, unfortunately, not just by putting out a product, but a lot of them will lobby the government for special rules. They'll use their buying
Right.
power. They'll use their quote unquote speech in order to, put their own business interests ahead of anything else. And that's one of the big problems. But as you
And
mentioned,
that's what a good business person does.
yeah,
You see,
and
there's a conflict of interest here.
yeah, absolutely.
That's a good business person. If I was the CFO or CEO of a company, and I was in the profit world, that might be something that would be a suggestion, even from someone who's like me. That if that's what I was doing in their company, that would be a suggestion. That would be an initiative. But again, it doesn't belong in things that affect morality or the American people or an environment. There needs to be some boundaries. Having competition against each other in a free market is one thing. Destroying our earth in the meantime and causing people to lose their lives is an entirely different thing.
Right. Right. We can have companies that make sneakers, and you can argue that, Nike is great at making sneakers. I don't necessarily agree, because I think a lot of their practices are exploitive in this current environment with, cheap shoes made in China. I know Nike's probably going to come after me for that, but yeah, bring it.
Probably.
Bring it. Yeah, well, I got the receipts to prove it. But, they shouldn't be involved, as you said, in things like healthcare. And unfortunately, that's something that I think still too many of the American people have falsely bought into, that, no, yeah, guys, it's okay. We should do, for-profit healthcare because the market knows best. It'll sell us a great product. These companies, they need our money, so they're going to give us a great product. No, what they're going to do is they're going to cut corners, and they're going to make sure that they deny people, and they're going to put on ridiculous overheads. Somewhere, 12 to 15%, I believe, is added on to the cost of healthcare as an overhead, whereas I believe Medicare has one maybe what, less than a percentage point?
It's around 8%.
Okay.
So if we were to institute Medicare for
Well,
all,
for all, right.
depending on the model, but yes, the Medicare in the current condition, yes, it's very small.
Well, there
It's,
is, there is, of course, problems with our current Medicare system because it's not universal. And
well,
so,
that and there are copays. So a lot of
right,
people,
right.
when they hear Medicare for
That's true.
all, they start thinking about it in its like current form.
Right.
Right
But we
now,
want to
you
change
have
it.
to have a supplemental insurance for Medicare.
Right.
So Medicare for all is completely different. It would cover, at 100%. There would be no copays. There would be no deductibles. One of the things that the person that I'm primarying said in an interview was that it would shift the cost from the corporations down to the employees, is why he would not co-sponsor HR 676. Wow, was that really incorrect information? So actually what it does is we already pay into Medicare. You might see a slight increase in your Medicare deductions from your payroll check of maybe, so for most people that are in making 60,000 or less, it'd probably be very minimal, if any at all. And even then, you'd have to be making well over $200,000 a year to see an increase that you'd really take notice in. And it would then take those funds and that they would use that to cover everyone. So right now, actually, the costs are not with our employers. The employers pay a portion of it, but employees pay a tremendous amount for healthcare coverage through an employer. We pay the portion that the employer doesn't cover, unless you're fortunate enough that they cover 100%. But even then, you've got your deductibles and your co-pays. So there is, the current system, we're already paying for health insurance. We're already paying extremely high deductibles and co-pays, unless you have a really big Cadillac plan from a company you're with.
Yeah.
So if we were to implement Medicare for all, it would be less expensive for everyone, with the exception of probably the ultra rich and the 1%. They wouldn't be getting the tax breaks they're getting now. They would have to pay their fair share. So unless you're the 1% or you're like extremely wealthy, you have nothing to worry about as far as there's being outrageous increases. And it would cover, right now, it's a proposed plan, the HR 676, it would cover medical, dental, vision, mental health. Imagine how many people could be helped with mental health.
Oh, absolutely.
Even our homeless. There's so much that we could be doing to improve our world in this nation if we just were able to give the appropriate medical and mental health that everyone needs.
Absolutely. And it's including dental in there, because I don't think a lot of people know that dental doesn't get included in a lot of plans. And it's very
Correct.
strange because, that is something that is also part of healthcare. And it's a very important part of healthcare, but it doesn't get included. It actually gets, it's a separate insurance in most cases.
Well, and think about it too, that I'll take it a little step further. Think about it too, that if you don't have dental care, and you're poor, or you're hardly making ends meet, and you can't afford it, and you're losing teeth, or your teeth are incorrectly shapen, or there's something, you've got a cavity and they're falling out. How does that affect your ability to get a job?
Exactly.
It's keeping you right where they want to keep you. You're right still there, not able to really move up the ladder. Not only is it horrible for your own, comfort and self-consciousness, but it also keeps you economically burdened. And then you're in this constant, a lot of people, I've been poor, so I know the struggle. And most people don't realize when they say, they can just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. No, when you are poor, it is a constant struggle. It's an unending, constant struggle. And one thing can set you back, and one thing can just make you homeless. One thing, takes one thing, and you're wiped out and you're not able to recover. So, healthcare and dental care, it's important for us to cover people so that they're able to get the appropriate care, so they're able to be healthy enough to work, able to get a jobs that they want to go for and not have to worry about, whether they have missing teeth or if they're
Yeah.
sick or if they can get off from work or, these are all things that need to be addressed.
And not only that, but it would save employers money.
Yes.
Businesses. I mean, look, there are a lot of businesses out there, and the number seems to dwindle every day, that offer health insurance through their companies. I know I've worked a lot, and I used to work in manufacturing, so I've seen the decline of the quality of healthcare plans being covered through the workplace, and how much more they have to shift more of the cost to the employee and the copays. So I've seen that. If you have a Medicare for all system, then you eliminate that.
Right. So I don't hear this talked about a lot,
No.
and I'm glad you brought it up. But if we're going to take aside the morality part of it and we just go for our economy and for our small to medium-sized businesses, it is a crutch for them to have to pay for healthcare or be able to compete for the talent that they need to be on the same playing field as the huge corporations. They can't afford the same talent as the large companies, and it puts them at a huge disadvantage when they're competing. And it's, our middle class is being hurt, and our entrepreneurship is being hurt in this country. People who want to work for themselves, they don't, because they can't afford insurance on their own. And what most people don't understand, employers are already paying for Medicare. That's part of the mandated taxes that they take out. Everything they take out of your check for Medicare and Social Security, they match. They're already paying for it. The slight increase that they would have, if you were to take a company like my last company I worked for, so there was about 30 employees. Our insurance every year cost $350,000 a year.
Wow.
You could save around $200,000 a year as a company with Medicare for all, and you would have a healthier staff. Your staff would be more robust because they're healthy, and you'd be able to compete. I mean, that's innovation money. That's more employees. That's equipment. You'd be able to compete and attract talent based on your company culture, not based on whether or not you can provide a Cadillac insurance policy.
Yeah, and we don't we don't have this discussion from the lens of a business owner, of somebody who's actually ran a small business. So I think that's an important angle to sell, Medicare for all on. Because, again, we can go through the moral arguments, and morally it's correct, and for the taxpayer it's also correct, it's going to save money. But from the business perspective, and I think that's a very important perspective in order to have this discussion on. And so,
Yes.
As somebody who was a former business owner, I mean,
A CFO. I didn't know
or
that,
CFO,
but-
sorry, CFO. I get those. I guess I got that confused. CEO, CFO, but
Yes.
as somebody who was the CFO, the chief financial officer, so a little bit about the cost.
Yes.
You saw that. You saw how much you're spending. Your company.
Well, when I first read the bill, that's the first thing I did, because I wanted to know what was going to be the argument against it. How was this going to affect people? I read through the bill numerous times, and I really studied it and made sure I understood what I was advocating for, and I understood how it would impact, the vast majority of Americans. That's important to me, that we do, what's good for the people in general as well as individually. So I really did study that and made sure when I first started my journey on figuring out, what I thought the best solution would be that would not cost anyone else their life. And we have 30,000 people a year still dying from a lack of insurance here. How many 9/11s is that?
That's a lot.
I mean, that was the first thing I thought, I was like, wow, where's the rage? Where's the outrage? And then I went into reading and looking and studying at all the different plans. And then when I put it down to notes, I'm like, this is crazy. Why are there not more business owners getting on board, or people in the community? If they understood really what was being, proposed here, I think there'd be a lot more support. But we're hearing a lot of misinformation coming out now. And, we're seeing a lot more Democrats now also throwing out there, buying into like a single payer option. these things are all not going to fix the problem unless we go to Medicare for all, and that's the profit motive.
Right.
And when you talk about the single payer option, I hear that being thrown out there a lot. Yes, might fix one portion of it, which is like, it wouldn't fix it, but it might help one portion of it by getting more people on insurance. But the people that are putting this plan through, or who are sitting out there talking about it, they must not have been poor before and been on Medicaid. Because to find a Medicaid provider, or the difference in treatment when you go to an ER with Medicaid versus a Cadillac, policy, is night and day. And you can't find Medicaid providers. And what about all of our people out in the rural areas? We have a lot of rural, constituents in Nevada. They can't find providers at all. These other programs that they keep putting out there to be the solution aren't fixing it in entirety the way that Medicare for all would. So not only is it fiscally responsible, it's also morally responsible. And that's why I've chosen to be an advocate of Medicare for all.
And we definitely need more advocates for it. And look, there's a good thing. There are some Democrats that are going on board. Hopefully it's not just, to, I guess, mollify people who are, calling for it, but you also have more public support on that. And yeah, I've had the problem with the Democratic Party using their flowery language and saying, "Oh, well, I'm supportive of it in practice. We just haven't figured it out." Like what happened in California.
The new one is I believe that health insurance is a human right. That's the new slogan.
Oh, see, I missed that one.
Health insurance is a right. You'll hear that a lot, even in Nevada, from the sitting congressman.
Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about Nevada, real quick here, kind of moving a little bit away from Medicare for all for a second. So I remember the primary. So I covered the primary, the Democratic Party primary. I remember the convention got a little raucous. There was some misinformation going on from that about what happened with Sanders supporters versus Clinton supporters, and since you're in Nevada, I remember reports of chair throwing. A guy named John Ralston essentially lying his ass off about, oh no, the Sanders supporters, they were violent and they were, they were extreme and they were loud and they were threatening and all that stuff. And just seeing that. I mean, I obviously I don't live in Nevada in that area, but it seems sort of hostile to progressives.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of damage done in Nevada to the party. There's still, when I go on Facebook, I still see people talking about Hillary versus, they call them Bernie bros. And there's still a lot of that. It can be hostile. I can tell you that it is a challenge to be primarying a Democrat, a Harry Reid pick Democrat. And we have seen Harry Reid getting involved in Nevada politics.
Oh, really?
Even making a call to Our Revolution when, actually, he called Bernie when Our Revolution Nevada endorsed Jesse Spey, who's running for Senate against Harry Reid's pick, Rosen. So he's still very much involved, and there's still a them versus us mentality. But there are also a lot of really excellent activists and people in Nevada who want to see progress. They want to see someone who is listening to the people, who is there, who will be there and fight for them with as much vigor in the White House and on the Senate floor and the congressional floor as they do in their own campaigns. They want people who are going to fight for the people. And those are the people that I'm really trying to reach out to and reactivate. A lot of people are very disillusioned with what happened in Nevada,
understandably,
during the primaries. And it's a challenge, but I have faith that my Nevadan constituents in CD4, as well as across Nevada, are wanting a change. They're wanting people to represent them. They're wanting people who will not only look out for the interest of, the major cities, but also the rural areas, that will look out for our landmarks and look out for the environment, as well as all the people that work in our industry, because, it's a tourist location. A big thing here is, a livable wage. They want people who are going to be champions for them in Congress and in the Senate, that are going to fight for them, and not donors and not special interest. Mm-hmm. So, I have to be very clear and unapologetically progressive, and state exactly where I stand on the issues, and I mean it. You can definitely count. You can look at my record, later down the line, you'll see there will not be 1 cent from a corporate donor. For me, it's not just running a grassroots campaign. It's much, much more to me than that. If I take money from a corporation, then I could be taking money from companies that could have my daughter's blood guilt on their hands. So I really am very adamant that I'm not going down that path. I want to be beholden to the people. And so part of that, and overcoming the struggles that we have in Nevada, is I'm going to be doing a listening tour. I'm going to be doing more listening than speaking. And if you went to my webpage, you'll notice that, our issue page, it has the main issues in there, but we've done that on purpose, that we haven't gone into too much detail, because we want it to be using the language and addressing the issues that the constituents in my district are facing the most, and making sure that I'm addressing those, as well as the issues that the American people are facing. So, I'm very excited to begin doing a listening tour. I'm very excited to meet a lot of different Nevadans, and having an opportunity to represent them, and represent their needs. But it is a struggle.
Oh, yeah.
And, we've still have, quite a bit of the establishment here, and we've seen it already in play. But that's a good sign, if you ask me. That means that they're nervous enough to be taking notice.
Yeah, that's for sure. Speaking of issues, I did go to your site, and I looked it up, and it's a very progressive platform, 21st century Glass-Steagall, more anti-monopoly policy, taxation, progressive taxation, obviously, getting rid of for-profit prisons, ending the drug war, affordable housing, affordable education. So, that's a very progressive Bernie Sanders-like platform. So, it's no wonder that you're seeing a lot of pushback in Nevada from the establishment. And I'm very interested to hear some of the the issues that are facing Nevadans. Everyday people. So, and I think it's interesting that you're going to go on this listening tour, and hopefully we can have you back so you can talk about what you've heard from regular people.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know that Nevadans right now, there is a lot of bills going in regarding our land and the usage of our land and our environment. That's on a lot of Nevadans' minds. Also, again, because we are a tourist location in Las Vegas, a livable wage.
Right.
You have all these magnificent buildings and money and wealth, and it's on the backs of Nevadans. Also, our school systems, we don't have a state tax, so our schools are struggling. The teachers need to be paid more. We need less administration, so we need some reforms going on in the schools. So I'm looking forward to speaking with the teachers and finding out what they need to help bring Nevada's schools up to the next level. Also, I'm going to start next month doing a listening tour up in rural Nevada. I've been reading some issues that they've had. I know that there is a vet's clinic that was closed down, and many vets didn't even know about it until after it already done. It's unacceptable.
Wow.
That is unacceptable. And it's not just a small, trip for them to go to the nearest, next vet clinic. These people live hours away from Las Vegas, and it was closed down without anyone knowing, not even their congressman. He was told about it after the fact. He didn't even know. So, and that shows how out of touch that the current representation is with the people in Nevada. They have issues with not having access to roads. There's lots of issues that are hurting the typical Nevadan that are not being addressed. I also know that we have some issues facing the LGBT community, and them not being addressed as robustly as they could be. So these are issues that I hold near and dear to my heart and want to make sure, in addition to healthcare, that are being addressed, to make sure that we have the best representation for the people possible in office. And I know one of the things we had recently was even trying to move to cleaner, greener energy sources, and that was pretty much shut down. We have solar. I mean, Nevada is like, walking out to a furnace, and it's got tons of sun, but basically the solar industry was shut down. So there's a lot of issues that need some strong representation, and needs strong leadership, and it needs leadership that's bold. That to me is key. It needs to be bold and unapologetically progressive.
Yeah, you have to stand on your principles and lead with your principles, and that's certainly something that we've been lacking in the Democratic Party for quite a while now.
Correct. It's across. I've seen it in many other states. I even met Paula Jean Swearingen, and we were talking about some of the trials and issues that she's going through in West Virginia with, primarying a Democrat. She's facing some similar, challenges that I am. And people seem to forget that, progressive doesn't mean that we're a different party or that we're from a different planet. And that's the way it feels sometimes. We're all in this together. We are all, facing some type of struggles or trials, and we could use the community pulling together, whether you're Democrat, Republican, progressive. We all have issues that if we got rid of the political rhetoric, if we got rid of the donors on both parties, if we got rid of, all of the lobbyists and special interest, and we just listened to the people, I can guarantee you I could go down to a very highly red Republican area, and if I could just talk to them and get past the rhetoric and talk about what struggles are you having, I am sure that there would be a majority of Americans that are probably facing similar struggles to what they're facing. It's almost as if they want us to continually fight each other and struggle against each other, because then we're not paying attention to the initiatives that are being passed, the bills that are being passed, and what's actually happening. A lot of times we don't even realize what's been done until after the fact, because we're too busy arguing amongst each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the media, the corporate media doesn't exactly help either on that regard. And there is an advantage to keeping people separate and playing red team versus blue team, and in horse race politics, I certainly remember the focus on that during the election.
What about the people that didn't know that the ACA was the same as Obamacare?
Oh my God, yes.
It's like that is a perfect prime example of politics and rhetoric, like inhibiting us from being on the same page about the issues that we could agree on.
Right. You've read about Kentucky, right? Where they have Connect, which was very, very popular among the people. And they said, okay, do you like Connect? Oh, I love it. What about Obamacare? Hate it. Same thing. Right. Same thing. But they don't know that. It just
boggles my mind.
You even had Mitch McConnell out there saying, I'm going to protect Connect while trying to repeal Obamacare. Classic politician.
And shame on him.
Absolutely.
Shame on him, because he should have known if he's in office what that is. That's sick and sad.
It is. And look, some of the people, I've ragged on Obamacare plenty of times, the ACA. I probably shouldn't even use the word Obamacare, but it's just in the popular lexicon at this point, and I just kind of default to it. But it's done good, and it's got good parts, and it's got some obvious bad parts. The Republicans, they had to resort to lying about it because it was their own bill. by the way, and they knew exactly
Right.
how to attack it. Um,
Heritage Foundation bill. If I,
yeah,
it's a Heritage
Heritage
Foundation bill.
Foundation, based on Romney Care from Massachusetts.
Right.
So, I mean, this was their plan. This is what they put into effect. So they knew all the weaknesses, but they didn't have anything to go back on either. You know, this was their plan. Barack Obama, President Obama, co-opted that plan throughout the public option, and we ended up with this, even with the Democratic supermajority. Even though it was a short time of a supermajority, we still had a supermajority. You could have got Medicare for all.
We could have.
Medicare polls at 77%, and what was it? The newest polls on Medicare for all are what? It's close to 60%, a majority of
So
Americans.
60%. It's like 62% of Americans.
Yeah, depending on the poll you look at, but that includes even Republicans. So,
Right. There's more Republicans that are for this type of insurance than are against it.
and that's
You know,
crazy.
70%. I know it's over 70% of Democrats, support this. So it's really just the politicians that are in the way of us of getting what is good for the people right now.
Politicians and the media, of course, because look, we talked a little bit about campaign finance, and where does all that money go? It goes into the media.
Right.
You know, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, all those channels, corporate media. Well, they're businesses, and there are some things, as we agreed to, that shouldn't be controlled by corporate interests and by profit motives. And I think media should be added to one of those.
Well, yeah, they took off the protections from the media.
Yeah.
And that was a big mistake. Now we have anybody can say they're media news outsource and they're not challenged. So the American people are often misled, and you have to go to other alternative sources to get
Right.
correct information, such as your show, to know what's really happening and what's really going on in America and get different viewpoints. It amazes me when I hear some of the news broadcasts and how they're presenting the issues that are facing Americans. And even they've gotten completely out of touch because they're no longer going, to the American people to get their information. It's like a big, personality and friendship fest amongst the politicians and the wealthy. And basically that's their news source.
And these news anchors are getting paid $4 or $5 million. I mean, what some of the Fox anchors like Megyn Kelly's like $20 million or something a year for being on television saying that Santa's a white guy. I mean, so this is the state of media in America, and that's why we have so many. And one of the reasons we have so many divisions among the people.
It is.
And
it's only gotten worse. I mean,
Right.
I don't know if I was surprised with what was going on in Charlottesville and the way it was portrayed in the media and even by our president.
Our president.
That's,
Oh boy.
it pains me to say that, but I'm saying it.
We could totally get into a long conversation about his response to Charlottesville, and and look, I'm going to say something controversial, but I think they're like, you could sit down with a normal conservative and have a good conversation, and we'll come away with, we agree on the problems, but maybe we have a different way of solving some of those
Right.
problems. People in Charlottesville ain't normal conservatives. That's not your regular person. That is, they're the people I don't think that we can reach. And I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, I don't know that so much Charlottesville as a lot of the people I've been seeing on the news. It was just where they congregated.
Yeah. I don't mean the people
Yeah.
of Charlottesville. I mean
Okay.
those
I was like,
people.
I don't want to
Yeah.
group the whole area.
No. The people that gathered in Charlottesville, the alt-right.
Right, the alt-right, yes. They've been emboldened. We have a president who has really not said or done the things necessary to make sure that we have peace. As a matter of fact, he's instigated a lot of it.
Yes.
He is, a blatant promoter of white nationalism, obviously a racist, and an apologist for violence and domestic terrorism. going forward, though, to combat him, it's just not enough to resist.
Right.
That's not a good enough strategy.
We tried that during the election.
Even just sitting around complaining about him, we have to go forward with a positive, aspirational, policy agenda that betters the lives of Americans. And we need to start looking to grassroots candidates, no matter where they are in the United States, studying what their issues are, really making sure that they're a good choice, and reaching out to sitting politicians if they're able to be moved left.
Right.
And not so much just as important just to say we moved them left, but that they are able to move away from a corporatist agenda to a more people-centered agenda. That's really important. And there's going to be a lot of healing. I'm the mother of, 5 children who are all people of color, and it's very saddening and disturbing to me that this is happening. I never thought that our country would go back to this level of racism again, although it's always been there. It's just not been as emboldened or pronounced.
Right.
And that has a lot to do with the messaging from the President of the United States and his campaign. Although I don't know that it's worse than it being, undercover, so to speak. But we can do something positive with this and have the hard discussions. Americans need to listen to each other. We need to listen to people with different experiences. I would suggest that people who are, white Americans listen to people of color that are their community members and their neighbors and their friends, and find out how we can take action to change the way that this government right now is pushing the American people. We need to be listening, doing a lot more listening, and being a lot more active.
Absolutely. I have one more question here. It's kind of spurred by the discussion about the president, but it's sort of about something that he had said in his famous Tuesday press conference, where he equivocated the protests, the neo-Nazi protesters with the counter protesters. He said the phrase alt left. So I've heard that before. See, you've heard that before too.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's Joyanne Reed, Neera Tanden from the Center for American Progress. I was going to put the air quotes in front of that. Yeah, that's been a slur that's been thrown at people like us for a while. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on the use of the word alt left.
It's just one of many. I mean, whether it's snowflake, alt left, libtards. I mean, I've heard them all.
But it's really? It's from progressive, or it's from the centrist, the establishments towards progressives.
Right. And there's social movements. If you study social movements, you'll learn that there's a whole wave of things that happens as you go through a social movement until you get to victory. And when they start going to the end, when they start, like, let's say, demonizing you, making a big monster, all these things, that's when you know that you're almost to the finish line. They said these things in every social movement. If you go back and you look, at the civil rights movement, when you look at all the movements we've had, there's always this part where they will, so to speak, demonize the people that are making the change. That's part of a social movement, and I'm okay with them using that term. To me, it is just their way of trying again to make us look like we are not centered, and they're trying to associate us with a negative, terminology that's used for the alt-right. Mm-hmm. So again, they're trying to box us in as being these people that are completely on the, way out there in their terminology, that we're not, we're not even realistic. And make us so that we're a destructive force. When reality, if you look back, 20, 30 years ago, the center of the Democratic Party would have been considered a very conservative Republican. So, we're really just the traditional Democrats, the ones that are for the people, the ones that are for the marginalized, the ones that are for the people in this country that are struggling. That's what the Democratic Party should be for. Mm-hmm. So, If it makes them uncomfortable that progressives are speaking up and we're getting a voice and we are pushing ahead and we are being bold and we're not giving up, well, then, that tells me that they're getting nervous and they know that we're on to them, we're on the right track. And I'm going to continue reaching out to people and letting them know that this isn't right what they're doing. And we need to be bold and we need to stand up regardless of what they call us. I mean, they can call me whatever they want. I know that what I'm doing is for the good of the people. It's for the good of Americans. It's going to save lives. It's going to increase people's joy in their life and make them be able to provide for their families and provide a future for their children.
Excellent. So can you stay a minute after we're done with the interview?
Sure.
Okay. So Amy, that's Amy Vilela, right? Hopefully I got the name right. I'm
Yes.
Thank you. You can follow her on Twitter at Amy for the People. It's with a 4, the number 4. And you can go to amyforthepeople.com, check out her website. And is that also the way that they can help you out with your campaign as well?
Yes, there's on my website, there is a place where they can donate their time, skills, or if they're able to donate any funds to the campaign. We are grassroots, so any help that we can get is greatly needed and appreciated. And again, it's Amy, the number 4, thepeople.com.
All right. Amy Vilela, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck in your campaign. I hope to have you back.
Thank you.